Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rachel Sampson. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Director at Visual Communications. Thank you all for joining us and spending time with us here at our C3 Converse presented by Nielsen. We'd like to thank our generous sponsors who have supported Visual Communications Armed with a Camera program. I'd like to thank Milton Liu and Kaneko, and then we especially like to thank the Academy of Motion Arts and Sciences, Final Draft, Flash Cuts, Los Angeles Department of Arts and Culture, SAG Indie, Sony Pictures Entertainment, West One Music Group, Writers Guild of America West, the Sundance Institute, and the Elizabeth Sung Scholarship Fund. Your support has allowed us to cultivate the next generation of Asian American and Pacific Islander artists, filmmakers who capture the world, the surroundings, and their outlook on life. And now I'd like to welcome two of our AWC alums, Farouk Virani. He's a filmmaker and editor who moves between narrative and documentary formats. As he finds one storytelling discipline informs the other, in his work. Farouk recently edited the feature documentary Ottolenghi and the Cakes of Versailles and has additional post-production credits on the Amazon series Hunters and CW's iZombie. He has a background in film production at USC School of Cinematic Arts and NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. He has a thing for big samosas. Farouk is an AWC alum, class of 2016. Marty Go, she graduated from USC and received a master's in film and TV production. She has an extensive background in producing indie features and over hundreds of commercials. From there, she transitioned into directing and is an HBO Visionary Award winner for her film Remittance. She recently directed a segment of Phobias, an anthology horror feature for Defiant Studios and Radio Silence. Marty also wrote and directed a feature entitled Rise, based on the true stories of Nigerian schoolgirls kidnapped by the terrorist organization called Boko Haram. During the pandemic, Marty finished shooting a horror feature she directed for Amazon Studios and Blumhouse. She is also an AWC alum, class of 2013.
Hey guys, so thankful to be here. Thank you so much for that really kind introduction.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy to be here, and AWC is a really special part of VC, and so congratulations to all of you for finishing your films, making it through a COVID year. So
yes, awesome. Thank you so much for inviting us to moderate, and welcome everyone to LA Asian Pacific Film Festival, produced by Visual Communications.
So as you heard, my name is Farouk, and I'm coming in to you from Houston, Texas. This is the bedroom I grew up in, and right now it's used as kind of a storage room. But anyway, we're making it happen, and I'm here. I'm glad to be with you guys. So yeah, thanks for having me.
And I'm Marty Go, and yeah, I'm here in Silver Lake, Los Angeles, California. So welcome everyone. Let's get our artist conversation started. Let's first meet all of our talented directors.
Oh, and if I could just make one quick note, if anybody would like to view with closed captions, we're going to drop a link in the chat box now. And if you click on that, it'll bring you a new window that opens up with the audio transcript. There it is.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start off with Catherine Chow, who directed A Cure for All Things.
And then next
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Oh, it's all right. Next we have the director of After Images, Brian C.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here.
Next we have Sandra Carbonell Kiamtia from that directed Back to the Source.
Hello, thanks for coming everyone.
Next we've got the director of Coffee Talking Out of Coffins, Q Lei.
Hi everybody.
Next we have So Young Shelley Yo, who directed Crashing Wheels on Concrete.
Hey.
And then next up, we got a very fine dressed young man, director of ETA, Justin Rickafor.
What's poppin', everyone? Thanks for being here.
Next, we've got Christy Choi, who directed Herself.
Hey everyone, so happy to be here. Thanks for coming.
Next up, King Lu, director of Home.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in.
We've got Serena Violet Hodges, who directed Mango Baby.
Hey, y'all.
And finally, Nirav Bhakta, who directed Thank You, Come Again.
Hey, hey.
Applause all around, yeah.
All right, so to start off, a lot of VC's legacy is actually rooted in its documentaries and capturing the communities around it. So in this group, we actually are going to start with two very powerful docs with distinct voices that capture their families. And yeah, so we're going to introduce or talk to the filmmakers of Herself and Back to the Source, Christy Choi and Sandra again.
Awesome, let's get into it. Hi,
You
Sandra.
guys, congratulations, what amazing work, all of you. I want to start with Christy Choi and just ask you some questions about Herself. We really love so many of the visual storytelling format choices of this really unique story, the telling of your mother's history and your relationship with her. Can you describe your approach in defining the genre and tone, and why did this feel like the right way to capture your mother's story and your relationship to her?
Thank you for that really good question. I guess I would start by saying that the life of this film began far before I started Herself making it. It's really so personal. It's about my relationship to my mother. But the actual work of it, the actual making of it began when I moved away from my mom and started just talking to her at length on the phone. And I was realizing I know nothing about her life. You know, I call myself a storyteller, but I hadn't really been brave enough to ask her questions about her own life or been vulnerable enough. So I started just talking to her on the phone and recording those phone conversations. And so you hear a lot of that, and that's kind of the through line of the film, are these phone conversations that are authentic, unscripted, obviously, between my mother and I. And from that starting point, I started thinking, you know, who was my mom before she became my mother? And that's where Herself, this sort of composite, beautiful figure, came into my imagination. And she represents my mother, but also my imagination of my mother, and my projections onto that imagination. And I really felt that through sort of the imagining of this Herself's character, that's how I could best encapsulate sort of this tension that I have with my mother, wanting to make her proud, but also wanting to understand her story and sort through my own projections onto that narrative.
Yeah, and then to follow that, I think, Sandra, you also had a very personal and poetic exploration of a relationship with a parent. And I was going to ask, how was it for you to utilize home videos and interviews of your father and kind of integrate them in this very public way? What were your feelings about that?
I was really nervous, and it was kind of difficult because while my father and I have a good relationship, we don't really have an intimate relationship. He doesn't like to share how he feels. He doesn't like to share his personal stories. That's just kind of the way he is. And I think a lot of my friends can relate to that with their parents. Like, they don't like to share. It's about you, like they're raising you, and like your whole upbringing is all about you. And so I think that it was really hard for me, not only because it's hard to be personal and then make your personal project public, but it's hard for my dad to be personal too. So, but it was a really interesting project, and I feel much closer to him having done it, which is what makes film really special to me. Mm-hmm.
Awesome job for both of you, just to be so vulnerable and give yourselves so much to these films, and we all really saw that. Christy, it was really awesome to see the moment where ownership of the lens and the perspective becomes your mother's for a sequence. And how was your mother impacted in the process of making this film, and what were her comments to you after?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, my mom and I are still talking about it, right? Because it's not just a film that I'm sharing with everyone else. It's a real document. It's a living document of my family. And my mom calls this her documentary, and it is. You know, at first, I think she was so reticent to be a subject And in some ways, making this film was a way for me to be vulnerable with her about filmmaking as a choice, as an identity for myself. But once she sort of got really excited about the process of being part of this film, she really ran with it. And so that section in the middle of the film, when she's reading the story that she wrote, actually right behind me in my own apartment, she wrote that herself, and I didn't know that she was going to write that. So she caught me by surprise. Again, I'm really glad that you noted this sort of playing with perspective and taking the lens. I think that last moment in the film, spoiler alert, I don't know if everyone here has seen it or not, but when I'm put down the camera and I sit down next to this herself's character, to me, I think it just represents this choice that I made to just sit with my feelings, right? I just spend this whole film exploring all these vulnerable emotions with my family, and I'm just gonna put it down and just sit with it and sit with this person I imagined, and sit with that feeling and see what comes out of it. So yeah, to answer your question, I think my mom and I are still talking about the film, and she wants to make a sequel. So let's see.
Oh, that's amazing.
And Sandra, similarly, I mean, it seemed like there was also sort of a deliberate shift, but for you, I felt like there was a shift from French to English at some point in the film. Can you talk about that choice and why you made that choice in the use of language?
Yeah. So originally the entire thing was in English, but I still felt like something was missing, and also other people that were watching it felt like something was missing. And I mean, there's something about there's certain words in certain languages that don't translate to across, and so I felt like it was important to talk in French for the chapters of my life that I was speaking in French to my father, and so that distinct shift was clear in the film as well, where it was like, not only did I make this deliberate choice to assimilate and it was easier for me, it was sadly also a point in my life where it was harder to communicate to my father, which I felt like was something a lot of people can relate to as they're growing up in a different country and they're choosing the language that their friends are speaking and that their school is teaching them. And then there's this point, I don't know if this is something everyone can relate to, but there's this point where it's harder to communicate to your parents because you're coming into your own identity and you're also not speaking their native language anymore. So I felt really sad that like coming to realize that in college, where I was like, oh, I made this deliberate choice and I know that it's not, I know that's something like we all go through, but I still felt kind of sad about that. And it felt really cathartic to illustrate that and do that inside the film. And it also had been a long time since I'd written in French and then spoken in French, and people who speak French can probably hear that in the film too. You can hear it. And I was really nervous too, because I was like, oh, people who speak French are gonna know, they can hear my American accent. But then I was like, well, that's what the whole film is about, is that I have an accent. And anyway, yeah, so it was a deliberate choice, but at first I was afraid to do it because I was afraid that I would have, my American accent would be too strong. But then I was like, wait, but it's part of the story, so yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, what you're saying is making me connect to, when thinking about language, the moment in Herself when my mom is saying "borup da," and I'm like, what is that? And she's explaining the dual meaning in that word, that it means jealous and proud, and a lot of folks that have watched the film have really commented on that. So just thinking about that in the context of what you just said, Sandra, too, that the language is just really, there is no, it's so challenging, right, to communicate across generation in that language as well. So just thinking about that now. Thank you.
That was exactly what I was about to mention. That like in that moment, I'm like, oh, you both have double meaning, double languages that bring this all together. And like, I think it's really awesome just because this whole program is like fostering people who come from various backgrounds and that have two worlds that are colliding and learning from that. So beautiful job, you guys.
Thank you.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Francis Rubio and Sophia Chang, and I don't know who else is on the chat right now, but I love you all. Thanks for helping me make this film.
Awesome. Chrissy, I had another question for you. So I really loved your music. I'd love to hear more about like what inspired it. From what it sounded to me, it was like many women's voices in harmony, and it just felt like you were pulling from, I don't know, ancestors, and it felt like almost angelic and and otherworldly. But you know, that's just me. I'd love to hear about how you created the music for this.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm super proud of the score. It was a total labor of love. As you were saying, you picked up on a lot of the themes. I was really imagining this chorus of different voices. And the original score was composed with a group of friends of mine, Brady, Jared, Chantel. I don't know if you're on the thing right now, but it's actually just a really great memory of mine because it's the last sort of group experience that I had before shelter in place. We were all in my friend's studio and recording all the different parts. But yeah, as you were saying, like, I just really wanted to tap into this idea of a chorus of voices that within us, within our personal self, we have multiple selves, past, present, future, imagined. And I'm just so thrilled with it. And it actually is available on SoundCloud. If you want to listen to it, I can drop the link into it. But I'm so proud of the score, and yeah, it was a labor of love.
Amazing.
I was muted, sorry. And then Sandra, another kind of personal detail or revelatory moment in your piece. You said you felt guilty at some point the way things were changing on the island. Why do you sort of take that on yourself, or I don't know, how do you continue to reflect on those changes?
Yeah, I kind of combined the two things that were making me sad, which was the development on the island and also me speaking more English than French in the house. I think that what I was trying to communicate was this sadness that I didn't know was going on inside my dad, that there is no home base anymore. He moved away from his home country, and his home country is now very, very different from what it was when he was there. And so it's like, oh, I'm native, but I'm also foreign in this place, and I don't recognize it like it was before. It looks so different. But at the same time, I don't think I ever made like this home in California fully a home. And I think that was really difficult for him. I think it continues to be really difficult for him. And I don't think I understood that as a kid. And as an adult, I understood it. I started to understand it more. And so I was trying to express that in my short film. And this is very new to me. That was a very new realization for me. And so in that same chapter where I'm switching from French to English, I'm feeling guilty that I'm switching to English. And I'm also feeling guilty for not understanding my father, because I was too young and naive to understand like other people's problems or my parents' problems, and that they were more than just my parents. That's what I felt guilty about. And also I had written my thesis at UCLA was about sustainable tourism, specifically in his home country, because I was feeling so passionately angry and sad about the quick development and how it was without thinking about the environment, without thinking about the cultures that were being destroyed. And people kept asking me, well, why do you feel so passionate about that? And I was like, well, don't you feel so angry about like this thing happening? But they were just like trying to get to the core of what made me so angry. And I think why I felt so particularly angry outside of environmentalism was that like this was part of my dad's core identity. And it feels so, it's like you're ripping a piece of your own heart when you can't go home and recognize it. And like, even people have a different like language, they have a different accent. It's been decades and it's not your place anymore. And they're also, I don't know, I could talk a lot about it, but even the official language of the island is English. And it's like, where is my home? And like, what is my identity? And it's so hard when you can't tether yourself to a community or an identity. And I felt passionately for my father in this moment where I was seeing this place that was his home look so different and so foreign to him.
Well, it really came across as really palpable, that sense of loss of cultural tie and the natural world, that it's sort of mourning that for your father as well. So
Thank you.
Congratulations on a really effective piece.
Yeah, great job, you guys. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, so much personal stories with us. So we're really appreciative for that. It really showed and it's very touching. Now we're going to shift from documentaries with a more personal perspective to two great docs that are more of character portraits. Our next focus is going to be on So Young Shelley Yo, who directed Crashing Wheels on Concrete. and Q-Lay, coffee, talking out of coffins.
There's a lot
Welcome,
of C's in
guys.
the titles. There's a lot of C's going on. Okay.
Welcome, guys. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Dandy. Lots of C's.
Good to see you all. Okay, so my first question is for So-Young Sheo. I love how we explored the tough time in the subject's life because it carried through today in 2020. But you really found a positive spin to how his person's life is today, despite the political climate. And from following the movie subject, what inspired you to end on this positive note?
Well, this was before COVID or anything like that. So we had all this optimism for what 2020 was going to be, and it didn't end up being what we thought it would. But regardless of what happened this year, we really wanted to keep the documentary as it was, as kind of a moment when we did have a lot of optimism, just to keep us going in our present day, that we should hold this kind of positive vibe throughout our lives.
I love that. I mean, even now that it seems negative what's going on today, I still think it's important to keep that positive spin. So I really love that ending. Great job.
Thank you.
For you, Q, you were able to capture this, or the feeling of a pretty huge moment for your subject, JR, when he finally gets his green card after 27 years of being undocumented. And he reveals quite a lot, the mixed feelings after, and he's pretty honest and candid about it. So I'm just going to ask, like, how you connected or how you decided that he'd be your subject and what your approach was in speaking with him and capturing his story.
Yeah, so I actually was looking to do another documentary, and I was applying to this fellowship. If you hear a noise, it's my cat in the background being a cat. So, you know, I reached out to several Asian American mental health organizations saying like, hi, I am looking to do a documentary on Asian American mental health. And what kind of like a hope of like, I really want to do an Asian American man, because there's that intersection of gender and mental health and culture. And I've always been very interested in understanding trauma. I'm ethnically Vietnamese. My parents are Vietnamese refugees. And I really wanted to understand, you know, what it is like to be an Asian American man, you know, deal and really to have a candid conversation about mental health. So I was on a plane in Chicago at the time. I sent out a bunch of emails. And if you're not familiar, the time stamp from LA to Chicago is about 2 hours. I got on the plane and I got off and I immediately got this email from JR who was like, I'm interested in to be interviewed. Can you talk right now? And I said, oh, cool, that's unexpectedly perfect. So we talked for about 2 hours. I was on my way to another film festival for another film. And I told him what I was doing. I'm like, I'm applying to this fellowship. This is what I want to do. And he said, I would love to be interviewed for it. Let me give you all the material so you can apply. I applied, I got in, and then I said, let's, you know, and the entire timelines, like from September to January, we were talking very regularly on the phone, on email, and I was just really having these candid conversations with him about, you know, so for those who aren't familiar with me, I actually don't have a formal film background. I came directly from public health and I'm self-taught in film, pretty much for the most part, up into 2018. So I'm really big on the ethics of documentary production. It's really important to me that the person I'm interviewing is comfortable, that the eventual film is representative of what they want and care about, and that I'm not breaking any like serious ethical quandaries, especially in a touchy subject like, you know, I'm HIPAA, like mental health is like, are you cool with me filming this? So it was kind of funny to kind of drop into Denver for 2 days shooting in January, which feels like 20 years ago, and to finally meet him in person. But we talked for 8 hours, and originally I thought it was going to be a short 5-minute film on mental health. And as he's recounting his moment and his green card status, I was like, holy shit, this is the story. So I talked to him. I said, hey, I've got 5 minutes. We have about 8 hours of footage, and I'm editing. I would like to focus on this pivotal moment. And he said, yes, that's okay with me. So that's pretty much the entire documentary process with JR.
Awesome. Yeah, we saw that you very much respected his story and wanted to, communicate it in a very respectful manner, and that completely came through. Shelly, I had a question about, how did you find your subject? Did you always know that you wanted it to be about skateboarding, or how did you find your subject and find this story?
Yeah, I always wanted it to be about skateboarding, and mostly about women in skateboarding, because I found that there aren't so many women in skateboarding. And so I reached out to a lot of friends. I put out posts on social media, and people referred me to others. I met with a handful of them, and Kat's story was really captivating. She also works as an engineer, which is a male-dominated space mostly. So I was just very interested in her and her presence in these mostly male-dominated spaces, and how she felt most of the time, and how she overcame certain boundaries that exist in those spaces.
Wow, that's really cool. Did you find that the subject of did you know the overall message of it, or did that change as you guys shot?
Yeah, I mean, upon meeting Kat, she's a very positive person. She's been through a lot in her life, and she has kind of a very free spirit. So I wanted to capture her spirit within the documentary as much as possible. So that's kind of how the ending came about. Even with everything going on, I wanted it to seem as if it was coming from her. How would she view everything? And
oh, that's awesome.
And then, oh, cute. You could tell you were very sensitive to your subject's story, and it was told in his voice very much, and you kind of get a sense of that it wasn't heavily edited, or it felt sort of free form. But I was going to wonder if that sort of release or conversations with you, if that was therapeutic for him as well, or if in some way, or how did it benefit him? Because it seems like he also does some outreach, and he has messaging efforts of his own. So I just want to see how it benefited him, or what, if he gave you feedback about that.
So JR actually really doesn't like listening to his own voice. I found out afterwards, which is fine. He was very transparent. He just told me he has a difficult time listening. But for me, it was this whole process. I'm like, you got 8 hours of transcript, and you've only got you can't show 8 hours unedited. So it was actually a pretty, I like hacking away at stuff when something works and doesn't work. And a lot of the interview isn't, it's not in sequential order. So anyone who's really familiar with editing knows that's usually what it goes. For me, it was actually a really great process to understand the degree of our immigration system's toll on mental health. I actually have some incredibly close friends who have attempted to go through it and couldn't complete the process, or completed it, but it really took a serious toll on their mental health. And really diving into JR's journey, the anxiety of what's going to happen, a lot that didn't didn't make into the final film, was really the how can I think about the future? Shelley's film is much more positive than mine. I'm just gonna put it out there, and I think that's great because we need that. JR is very action oriented. He's like, this is what I'm gonna do within my means and resources. And for me, it was more of okay, this is just a snapshot, cross section of just how really really bad this entire system is. Now imagine if you have a language barrier. I mean, that's shit. I don't know what to say. So, and we were doing this all before COVID, and there's all these stories. So for me, there was a sort of catharsis, but there was also a bit of sad resolution and cautious optimism that came out of it. I'm like, look, it's so bad, but then laying out the framework of how bad things are, then you have very plausible action items where you can say, okay, this is how bad it is. This is where we can improve, and these are these concrete steps, not these abstract ideas of like, what can I do? These are actionable items. So, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and even through this sort of brief portrait of one person's journey through the immigration system, you get so much. So, I mean, I'd be curious to see if you explore a larger documentary later or interweave in more portraits, but it's very effective. And so I hope you keep up this journey of showing people the story behind it.
Thank you.
Shelly, I have one more question for you. So I really enjoyed how the film felt very fly on the wall. I felt like you really built a rapport with the subject and her friends, and they seemed so natural and comfortable in front of the camera. I'm just wondering how you got there. Was that instantaneous, or what did you do to build that kind of trust?
Yeah, I met with Kat several times before the actual shoot, and with her friends, that was all our first time meeting. But I feel like they have so much fun skating, and this is something that comes so natural for them that we were just kind of always in the background, and they didn't pay much attention to us. Unless we called attention, we're like, can you try this? But for the most part, they were just having fun, and we're just capturing their energy.
Wow. Yeah, that was very natural. They seemed like, I don't know, just like it wasn't anything, like they weren't uncomfortable. Really, really great job on that.
Thank you.
And Q, I guess I'll just ask the second half of the question I was starting to create, but I guess, yeah, do you have plans to continue working with the footage or complete this in a slightly larger form, or continue to explore this topic with other subjects?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that happened after our film, JR and I did actually a podcast for a couple of weeks, just having these conversations and about Black Lives Matter, and something as serious as like, what is defunding police, and what is a restorative justice system looks like, very like topics like that. And one of our last podcast before we went on hiatus was actually, we interviewed a Vietnamese refugee, so my people, and he is actually, there's this huge thing going on with COVID and our criminal injustice system where people who are, refugees or immigrants who were, incarcerated for whatever reason in their adolescence are now being sent to ICE for deportation. And we spoke with, a person who's in that situation right now. And, it was tough to talk to him, especially because for me personally, I know all the cultural specifics of what it was like for him to grow up a Vietnamese refugee and the environment he was in. So to answer your question, absolutely. I'm also going to take some time to ensure I don't burn out from this year, which I'm sure everybody is doing the best they can. Yeah, I'm always looking for intersections of mental health aspects, like public health, mental health, criminal justice. Everything is linked to some kind of public health issue. Then I really want to eliminate that, or illustrate that visually in film.
Absolutely, yeah. It's excellent that you've been able to pick up the visual medium as a tool to advance the things you care about and the issues that need to be publicized. So thank you. So I guess with that, we are going to shift gears away from documentaries. Thank you both for your thoughtful answers.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions.
So now we're going to do some narrative films, and we have a couple works that focus around family and family dynamics, and we're going to be speaking with First, Brian C. of After Images, Justin Rickafor with ETA, and King Lu with Home.
Woo, hey guys.
Hey.
Hey, yo.
Hello.
Okay, so I guess I'll kick it off by speaking with Brian. Your film had a very unique visual style, and from the aspect ratios to the production design to the art, cinematography. Can you talk about why you felt like this was what inspired you to shoot this way, and why this was the correct kind of visual style for this film?
Yeah, I think early on we wanted to shoot anamorphic and have this really like stretched out screen. I think it was mostly because we wanted to work with negative space a lot to kind of play with like the horror movie genre. The whole like visual idea was film it like a horror movie, but the script is kind of like a comedy slash, family coming of age sort of film. So that kind of like dictated all our choices. And then Paul, our producer, got a really good deal on anamorphic. So I got a shout out to Paul for doing that. But basically he like went to rental houses and just asked until we could afford like a set. And then with the Amira, it's really weird. You can't you can't do like a 2x anamorphic technically. So it just becomes this really like stretched out thing. And we were looking at like early like Hungry Ghost scrolls, because that's who our character was about. So to kind of like pay homage to those scrolls and how they're kind of like these wide aspect ratios, we were like, this is cool. Let's just do this, yeah.
It worked out great. So
Yeah, very unique.
Yeah.
Awesome job.
Yeah. And I also think just want to shout out Yana and Damien and Scully, who are like lighting and camera, because like Damien and Yana, they've been working together for a little bit. They worked on my last short film together, so like their lighting was just like constantly exceeding expectations. It was really amazing. So yeah, shout out to them. Thanks.
Awesome. So my next question is for Justin Rickafor, who did ETA, who's Filipino. Shout out, man.
That's
Nice
right.
representation. Love it, love it. I really felt and related to the story as a Filipino myself, and the expectations that our parents have for us. I wanted to ask you, the story felt very personal, and was it inspired by true events?
Yes, it was. But the story that happened in the film didn't actually happen. It's kind of like a collage of, it's a collective autobiography. Shouts out to Carlos Bulosan. And all of the other Filipinos who kind of don't know that their history is that important. I think that there is like a generational loss that seems to deem a certain type of history to prioritize others. That includes a lot of self-shame and self-violence, self-abuse that ends up getting passed down very unintentionally a lot of the times. And so if there's anything that I want to like, if there's a word that ETA is really about, it's about the concept of waiting, and about how like waiting for healing to come never takes the form that you expect. And everyone together kind of has to figure it out in very uncomfortable, awkward situations. In our situation, it's in a rideshare. And being able to place a very important growing moment that also makes everyone uncomfortable, hopefully the audience as well, speaks to me, because yeah, like a lot of my growing moments have been really uncomfortable, embarrassing situations. So I think people need to feel more embarrassed in films. Like, it's human. And yeah, embarrassment makes you feel alive.
I have goosebumps because I literally was writing something right before this whole thing about just what you're talking about, and embarrassment and holding things in and putting people in front of ourselves, and how we do that and we pass that on to generations. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I feel nervous and scared right now, but I feel alive, so I relate. So, now we're going to move to King's film, Home. Yeah, I felt like you were able to create this in a short time, this very loving and sensitive portrait of an older woman dealing with the effects of Alzheimer's and trying to get a sense of the reality around her. And I was just wondering what your personal inspirations were, if there's something you were really drawn from your background or own history in creating this. And I also wanted to say that your lead actress, appreciation to Karen for her excellent portrayal. So.
Thanks, Farouk. Yeah, there's definitely some personal inspiration. So it's definitely based on my grandmother on my father's side. She had Alzheimer, and I think she had a couple of strokes too towards the end. And I had a chance to visit her in China before she passed, and just being around her and seeing how she constantly needed to be supervised, and things would change from one moment to another, where she would be really clear-minded, and in the next moment she wouldn't remember who I was or why I was there with her. It was such a jarring experience. So that's definitely something that I wanted to tackle. And then on top of that, I think just I was inspired by a lot of things that happened in my family, where there was some conflict and tensions between different sides, between my mom and my grandmother on my father's side, where there were some conflicts where my dad kept wanting to bring her to America to stay with us. And that was really difficult to convince my mom to allow that, for reasons of health insurance, and because both of them were working, there wouldn't be anybody to stay with her and take care of her at home. So kind of wanted to play with a fictional version of what might have happened if he had tried to do that.
Great, yeah, I can see the family wrestling with that decision through their portrayal. So.
Yeah, very powerful. Brian, my next question is for you. Can you talk about the papers that are burning? I think just from like my very small knowledge on what that would be, I'm thinking that they're spirit paper, but if they're not, could you please tell us what they are and how is that connected to the spirit of his aunt's return?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think it's like Joss money, and you would burn it on the Hungry Ghost Festival. So we have like the calendar that's like September 2nd, and then he's burning the money. And the idea was kind of to try to connect the money burning to her arriving. So when she's like walking in the first shot, it's the money is kind of, she's receiving it, right? Because that's why you burn the money, is you burn it so the ancestors receive it. So we were kind of setting that up, like if you have some like cultural knowledge about this, you kind of know where this is going. So yeah.
Yeah, visually it's very striking and almost scary. Like, you know, it almost came off like a horror film in a way, where, you know, you've got these low angles and you've got paper flying and burning, and then she's, you know, feasting. So that makes a lot of sense. And it just really, I don't know, made me think about more, like wanted to know more about what this means. And it's really great.
That's great to hear. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, the money shot was really fun. We had it on a dolly, and we were trying to shoot around sunset. So people were like, the whole crew was in on it, and we were just throwing money like as the camera was following Aunt May, and then we would cut and we'd have to pick it all up and reset and do it again as the sun was setting. So it was, that was probably awesome. Like the most fun we had on that shoot.
Oh, that's so awesome.
We get some comments in the chat box. People are saying Cash Money was like a rap music video. So congratulations.
I love how he also said money shot, which is like, yes, literally the money shot.
So Justin, in a very confined space, you're able to pack a lot in and also unpack a lot of sort of cultural issues. And could you talk about how the pursuit of arts in Filipino culture is generally received, or sort of spoken about by parents, or in your own parents' case, like how do they feel about what you're doing?
Yeah. Hi, Mom. If you're watching this recording, it's me, your son. How did I get here? But yeah, in all seriousness, I think that in my specific family, and some of my friends who are like sort of the same generation, no one knows what's going on. We all try to do what we want to do, and then our parents are like, that's never happened before because we've only been here for like 20 years. So then when it happens, it's kind of like it's a culture shock again, where it's kind of like, oh, you know, like the opening of what's possible constantly gets bigger. Like the door always kind of finds its way to other doors. For me, for filmmaking, as a Filipino American, like I could never, like even when I was in college, I could never sort of align the two perfectly. Like I didn't know what it meant to film as a Filipino American or the other way around. I didn't know other people look like me. I didn't know other people were interested in all of this stuff. So I had inherited like the devaluing of my own culture, which I didn't know that I was doing until like it became time for me to start making things that would reveal what my voice wanted to become. In the context of ETA, the filmmaking process was very much about trying to create as much space as we could. And I knew right away I wanted to film in a car. And it was like, how far away can we push each other? How can we make the silences like the loudest thing in the film? How can we make the car running like the only noise that you hear? And then how can we make it turning off like the rest of the world, like the dust settling? Because when you read the script, it's kind of like son and dad look at each other. But it's really like not like that. It's like a vacant stare into the void for miles and miles that they can never bridge. But I'm not going to write that. So trying to play around with the unspoken is sort of where I want to live between all of those intersections.
Yeah, no, and I think you found a lot of great visual ways to do that. If it was just, you know, isolating them in their two shots or like through the rear view or through the rear view mirror or things like that. But yeah, you get the sense of their rift and space between them. So congrats and kudos.
My next question is for King. So the majority of the film is contained within one space in the motel room, except for the moment where the grandmother steps out into the outside world. What had you decide that in doing that, and how did this location support your narrative? And yeah, tell us about writing this film in that way.
Thanks for the question, Marty. It's a tricky one. I think definitely we wanted to have the film be really contained so that you feel the sense of claustrophobia for the grandmother, since she herself is not able to leave and explore outside the room also. We went through a lot of drafts. I can't even remember exactly how many, but I definitely was playing around with the structure a lot. I think it was just really important to have one scene as a contrast where she's outside. And to, I guess for me, I wanted to leave it on a bit of a bittersweet note, kind of, that's a little bit mixed in feeling, because she is finally free for the first time. She's able to leave the room and do what she wants to do without being controlled by the rest of her family around her. But at the same time, she's also incredibly unsafe, doesn't speak English, and is now on her own at night in the street in Los Angeles. So I think that was kind of the feeling that we wanted to go with. And I guess speaking to the writing process, I guess it was definitely always really important to have that. Earlier on, we were playing with drafts where the film was taking place. A lot of it was at the airport when the grandmother arrives in America and there's nobody there to pick her up. And then also when she's wandering through Chinatown alone at night. So I think we just wanted to find a way to maintain that in this current structure.
Yeah, I think that was a beautiful way to tell a story. It was a little bit shocking to see that even her granddaughter felt like she didn't care too much about her, and it was like you just felt how she felt to be, you know, just lost. And so when she did get free in the end, it was oddly satisfying in a way, even though you're scared for her safety. So great job with that.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, I think one more question for Brian. It seems like there's a sort of political background kind of threaded through the script. And in regards to the aunt character, can you talk about what that political upheaval that she died during was, and do you have any connections to that political event, or have heard?
Yeah. So I mean, she's mentioning the Cultural Revolution, and I kind of decided to fuse like two ideas. So with my grandpa coming to America, he immigrated during World War II, and fled like during like Japanese bombing. So, but timeline-wise, that didn't really work out because we were gonna set it in the 90s or the 80s. So then I started looking at my grandma's story, and she was the one that came during the Cultural Revolution. So then I started talking to family members. I got in touch with family members that I've never talked to, just to ask them about their experience. They were actually there during the Cultural Revolution. So they told me like firsthand accounts, really like strange details. It was super helpful, and it sent me kind of on this whole like research path for a while. And then, yeah, I think in the film we decided to just kind of hint upon it because we wanted, I mean, I think Kenny's character has trauma, right? Like he has like the trauma of like fleeing. So, you know, on the dinner scene, he kind of reveals that for the first time, I think, to Michael's character, Bloom. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where it was, just kind of like melding the two.
Yeah, no, that it's great that you have that sort of source reality to draw from, and just that little bit of texture plays, and yeah, the little details that you put into the characters. So, yeah, your work paid off.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Justin, my next question's for you. So I really liked how the story took a lot of unexpected twists and turns. I wanted to hear what your intention was for when the character finds his father's notebook and decides to take over driving.
So kind of the route change in the film, like the temperature change between Ronnie and his son, Josh, is based on a story that I've heard from a friend that was, their parent was kind of divulging to them that they had tried to become an artist, and that their child, my friend, had also wanted to pursue the arts as a career, but their parent had failed. They explicitly said that it is impossible now. Like, I had tried to do it and you can't do it. And I was thinking a lot about that, because I think even though it's not explicitly said, we kind of understand the feeling of a parent's lifetime and like see ourselves mirrored through our parents, like when we start to become adults and become closer to them. So really that moment of exchange is that really silent understanding that, you know, we are in a very hard time right now, me and my parent figure. How are we gonna get through, like, you thinking I might be an interruption in your adult life, and how can I get through my adult life not being able to replicate that type of unspoken damage? And so, like, silence resolves silence, that, and then action takes the place of silence, that, you know, I know that you're a human being now and I can take over. If you trust me to take over, then we'll see where we can go from here. And I think that really is the, like, what makes me very emotional about the story is that I know I have unresolved conversations and silences with so many people in this world still. And if I can sort of speak to that generosity, to give them that space to help us both get to that point, then I think that, like, we can resolve any conflict. And yeah, like, it's about my parents too. Like, it's not actually them, but like, me and my mom will talk at home. Hi, Mom.
I mean, I love the bravery in that. Just, I really like the switch in that he's like, you know what, let me take the wheel. This is my life now, and you're going to be here to witness, you know, my greatness or how I perceived it. So, awesome.
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. Yeah, so much goes sort of unspoken emotionally sometimes in Asian American households, and it's those kind of gestures and acts of service, or this is how you communicate what you're really feeling. So um, that worked. Okay, so I think our last question for this set, I was going to ask King. You might have already touched on this, but that sense of kind of freedom and just like entering an open world that the grandmother character reaches at the end of your film. I don't know, does that reflect something that happened in your own grandma's life, or kind of could you speak to her condition, or?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Farouk. I guess I never really thought of it explicitly, but now that you mention it, I think it does. So the situation was very difficult. I think for all of us, we all felt a little bit guilty about it. Like I mentioned, my grandmother was not in a very good state towards the end of her life. She constantly needed supervision, and I don't know the specifics. So my father has two sisters, and both of them, one of them I think actually is in LA, and the other one is still in China. But she was working. I think she had a family. She wasn't able to take care of her. So actually, I don't know all the specifics, but basically she went to go live with her sister, who also was in a really bad state physically. I think she had trouble moving around. And then her sister's daughter was actually taking care of both of them at the same time. And I actually had a chance to visit them I think in Guangzhou. And it was just a really, really small place. There was 5 people living there. And the daughter was also not super happy about the whole situation because she also wanted to go back to work. And so I think it was just a lot of different factors. And every time they had tried to get a nurse for my grandmother, she would always get into arguments with them. And she's very stubborn and strong-willed. So that never worked out. So there really was never a really good situation for her. And I remember hearing a story from my mom once that I think my grandma had wandered outside when nobody else was home, and it was really cold during the winter, and then she got locked outside or something, and she just couldn't find her way back inside. So she just fell asleep on the porch outside, and then they came home and found her there. So I think just stories like that really touched us, and we all felt really guilty about it. And again, we couldn't bring her to the U.S. because of her health state and all of that. And yeah, I think the story that really cemented it was when my father saw her for the last time, when he left, and he said bye. And I think she was a little bit confused about where he was going. I think she thought he was like going for a walk around the neighborhood or something. And then he left. And then later, after he had gone, he got a call saying that she had passed away. And then when he went back to talk to the nurse who was looking after her at that time, she had told her that she asked the nurse, "Hey, where did Dad go?" And then when she had told her that he had gone back to America, she started crying. And then they were saying that, oh, I think she had a feeling that the end was coming. So I think just all of these stories were definitely really haunting. And I think just her being in that situation, not having much freedom of movement, and her health state, I guess made its way into the film, even though it takes place on a totally different continent in totally different circumstances. I guess that question of how to deal with somebody in old age and across different continents made its way into the story.
Thank you guys so much for your personal stories, and my heart is like hurting right now. Thank you. I mean, like you are honoring her with your film, so her story will live on forever because of what you've made. So that's something positive. So let's transition to our next 3 narratives. They utilize a very unique device of time and memory. Let's introduce Catherine Chow, A Cure for All Things, Serena Violet Hodges, who made Mango Baby, and Narav Bhakta, who made Thank You, Come Again. Welcome, you guys. Yay! Okay, so we're going to start with Catherine Chow, who did A Cure for All Things. Wonderful movie. This was such a unique way to tell the story of her family. You use sci-fi and fantastical elements. Can you please tell us how you created this? Such a very interesting way to tell it. Tell us what inspired you.
Yeah. Sometimes people will ask me if it's like a real story about my mother, and my mother is very much alive. She's in the movie. She plays the grandmother. And really it was just a confluence of like all of these feelings that I had been thinking about. I had just spent the last year in Taiwan, where I'd been meeting all these young Taiwanese people, and I had also moved alone to France as a university student to go and get my degree there. And like the combination of moving to another country by myself and going through all of that alone kind of gave me new insight into what my parents had gone through. And then talking to young Taiwanese people in Taiwan, I got this like view into what like my parents might have thought or been like when they were young. And I would talk to people who really wanted to go to the US. And so like all of these experiences made me feel like I was sort of time traveling, almost like I had come from their futures as their like what their children would be like years from now, and was seeing their parents early on. And so just trying to capture that feeling of that you have when you're part of a diaspora, of like even when you're in one place physically, you're actually mentally occupying two different spaces in two different times, even, or three different times, however many in your personal experience. And that sort of naturally translated for me into a sci-fi element, because like film is such a wonderfully visual medium that you can represent these things that don't exist in real life and bring out emotions in a tangible physical way. And that's where that device came from, of the physical glitching between the mother and the daughter and their various, you know, family relatives.
Oh, how interesting. Yeah, I love that. What an interesting way to tell the story.
Yeah, and I have a question for Serena. You also had interesting narrative devices and ways to sort of weave in and out of memory. And South Asian American, pretty much anything mango gets my heart going. So it was very tender, and I was transported to memories of my own family. Can you maybe talk about your relationship with your own grandparents and how that kind of informed the story you wanted to tell?
Yeah, totally. So definitely, first and foremost, the film is dedicated to my maternal grandparents. I knew them as Bilushana and Dalushana, but they're my grandma and grandpa. And I was really lucky to grow up with them for the last 10 or so years of their life. They came and lived in Minnesota, which is where I grew up. And I think that growing up as a biracial person, I've just always really struggled with that identity and like sort of riding this line between one culture and another. And my grandparents were really people who made me feel like I can claim a South Asian identity. Like just my relationship with them was really special, and their primary vehicle of care was sharing food. And yeah, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so much love and culture is sort of passed through food in our circles, in our cultural circles. So.
I thought it was so interesting because the first couple images looked like the Philippines. I was like, oh, Philippines. And I'm like, mangoes, yes. And I was like, oh, wait, no, it's not. And it was really cool because it kind of like, you know, transferred over all these, you know, Asian cultures that were like, wow, this feels like my story as well, you know? So that was beautiful.
And I think the mango itself is so particular because it takes such a long time to peel. And so like, when we say what's an extension of care is like, okay, this person is literally going through the process of serving you a pretty difficult fruit.
Exactly. Definitely. It was very, I don't know, it just brought back so many childhood memories for myself as well as Farouk. So thank you. So my next question is for Nirav. Thank you for creating such a powerful way to capture the discrimination and the difficulty of assimilating as a minority post 9/11. It was very, very powerful, and especially now in Trump's America. Can you speak about how your own experience growing up in a family of South Asian American business owners influenced your story?
So Thank You Come Again was inspired more by a feeling. It was that feeling after 9/11 where all of a sudden my skin, which was for the longest time in the media either represented as a hyper comedic caricature, meeting my immigration status, which at that point I was undocumented, living in Texas. So there's this like additional sense of pressure to stay quiet. And well, sorry, I'm just really nervous because it's hard to talk about these things because I've never really spoken about them publicly. Even sharing the film, it's kind of tough putting it out there.
You gave such a raw performance, so
thank you.
Thank you. It was very, very touching. You should be very proud of what you did.
Thank you. Yeah, my family and many of like other families, especially people that grew up in like the deep South or wherever, people had to put American flags on their business fronts or their cars or backpacks or whatever it may be, just to tell people that, hey, we're American, or to prove our patriotism. And for someone like me who wasn't documented at that point, it was like, we're one of you, you know, and at that point, you never really think about it in that way. But now that we've all like kind of grown and we're more aware of like the political climate and whatnot, it's kind of sad that we had to do that we had to prove ourselves to people.
Well, thank you so much. It was very raw, and again, your performance was amazing. So great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think obviously film was a way of purging some of those feelings, and yeah, no, that it totally came across. It felt like you were having some kind of catharsis in the performance, so it was great. And then sort of segueing, Catherine, did you sort of have a kind of an emotional takeaway, or after being able to make this, or did you find some sort of release of your own, or what are your thoughts after completing the film?
Yeah, it's definitely the closest. I'm always shocked that I pulled this off. It's definitely the closest I've ever come to just fully like expressing my like the things that I think about the most about my identity, and also my visual style and the things that I want to accomplish as a filmmaker. It's all there in this movie, miraculously. For me, it's, I don't know, it's like you enter the film through the point of view of the daughter, and it's like somebody that's like us, somebody whose parents immigrated over here. And I wanted to translate that feeling of like, I wanted to sort of use that as a way to get the audience to identify with her and be like, this is the main character of the story. This is like the way that you think you're the main character of the story, because, you know, your parents are immigrants, but like we always think that we are the first to ever experience this thing of immigration. And then over the course of the story sort of reveal that it's the mom's story this whole time, and that immigration has happened and is a casual event and takes shape in many different forms. And so that was sort of my big emotional takeaway, was realizing for myself also that the story is not about the young woman, but really the mother who makes the choice to move here with her daughter.
Yeah, there's a great theme of kind of a history of movement and migration and how that kind of translates from one generation to the next. And we all sort of lose something or pick something else along the way. And so I thought the visual devices you used to capture that.
Awesome. My next question is for Serena. I noticed a really a small detail in the film that I feel like meant so much more. And there's a part where the little girl can't handle the spiciness of what she's eating, and so her grandma takes the mango jam and has her, you know, soothe her Americanized tongue. Can you tell us more about what that meant, and yeah, just tell us more about that moment.
So every scene in Mango Baby was based on a memory, and I wrote this essay in 8th grade that was about that moment. And 8th grade is when both of my grandparents passed away within 3 months of each other. And what I sort of assigned that memory to is like this feeling of accepting a loved one's death and like processing that. And so there was this moment when I was, so every Friday we would go over to my grandparents and they would cook meals for us. And so whenever there was a chili, I would throw a fit. And like my mom I love you, Mom. Also, shout out to my mom. But my mom would always be like, oh, you always have to cultivate a taste. Like, you know, like, just suck it up. You got this. And my grandparents were the only ones that were like, let me take you to the kitchen, give you some jam, like, let this blow over, just hold it where it burns and it's gonna pass, kind of thing. And so in that same way, I like seek that comfort whenever I'm mourning them or missing them.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful.
And Nero, if you had a really powerful way of looking at memory and trauma through the way the convenience store space sort of changes over time, from like him seeing like a young version of himself, and then the space even physically like changing environment. You can just talk about your creative process and scripting and why you felt like this was the right style and format to like explore this.
Well, number one, I wanted to explore. I think post HBO Visionaries, I felt a lot of pressure in terms of delivering what was next, and I kind of wanted to free myself up with that and follow maybe a narrative structure that isn't most like linear. But I honestly was just following a feeling and trying to create from the character's perspective. And through that character's perspective, you know, grief is a really dark feeling. And I've had, for example, in my own family, when we were still undocumented, my grandmother passed away in India. And I remember viscerally seeing my mother like trapped here almost. Like, she would wake up and pray every day and would pray for her healing, but she ended up passing. So this like feeling of like not knowing, helpless, whatnot, and what's going on in this person's psychology, right? And in grief, the memory, and sorry, I'm like making no sense, but the film is structured through the 5 stages of grief, if that makes sense. So it goes from like happier times to darker times to the most to being depressed, and then finally finding acceptance to the father's death.
Yeah, totally. No, I felt that. And even though your character is largely in one spot, you see him cycling through all these as the store around him changes. So dope.
Catherine, so I have a question for you. Can you tell us more about how you created the futuristic robot character? Like, how did you think of that character, and what do you think it means in terms of connecting the past?
I have to first shout out my producers, Mel and Frankie, who I share custody with Christy, for helping me find that outfit. But based in the thrift stores in LA. But basically, I was trying to think of like how do you represent, like, within even just a Taiwanese American person, our past. It could manifest in so many different ways. People have a lot of different ways that their families arrived in Taiwan, and then, like, you know, everybody's experiences are just so different, even though we share this label of Taiwanese American. And so it was really important for me to carefully choose the side characters that I created in this story. And so when I thought of the future, I mean, I just thought I wanted to make her biracial. I wanted to make her Black, and I just, like, it just casually was there. And then I'm trying to think back now. But I also wanted to explore, you know, most importantly, I wanted to explore what does it mean to be a part of certain culture. Like, what does it mean to be Taiwanese American when you don't necessarily speak the language, when you don't look Taiwanese American or Taiwanese? Like, what is it that ties you to a culture if you don't have physical markers of that culture? And so that character was sort of a representation of that. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I felt like a little bit like the Wachowski brothers, where we're like going back and forth into time, and we've got futuristic stuff and past stuff. So it was really cool.
Thank you.
And Serena, it seems like I mean, if I'm correct, part of your film was actually shot abroad. Can you talk about what that experience was like and when that footage was captured?
Yeah. So this is my first fiction endeavor. I come from the background of documentary and also particularly cinematography. So this summer of 2019, I had the honor of filming for a former professor in India, and during one of our breaks, I was able to go to Kolkata, where my family is from, and meet some family for the first time. And of course, when that family heard that I love mangoes, one of the first thing we did was go to the market and get mangoes. So obviously I had to take my camera out for that.
That was really cool. Just everything just felt so grounded and real and dreamlike and beautiful at the same time. So kudos to that. Yeah, so again, like your shooting style was very stylized, really interesting to go from, reality to seemingly almost supernatural, dreamlike states. Did you have any particular filmmakers that inspired your shooting?
I don't know if for this film specifically, if anybody inspired that. Again, it was just really reaching deep inside and kind of hyper focusing on what is that feeling? What am I feeling? I've trained for so long as an actor that and you've also trained as an actor, so we benefit from this where it really drives our imagination wild. And thank God I collaborated with an amazing DP, Sam Chatterjee, who brought a lot of this vision to life. And a lot of indie filmmaking is you make with what you have. You might think of ways of how you want to film something or how you want to make something, but when you're actually on set, you adjust. The film becomes a whole other entity on its own, whatever it's destined to be. So I've just played with this movie, to be honest. I tried to free myself up to just play.
Yeah, it felt very poetic. Have you seen The Ritual? It kind of has a similar poetic type of element where they're in a store and it goes in and out of his memory. So check it out. But I loved what your DP did. Really great job, you guys.
Yeah, and I think congrats to everybody. That might be all the time we have for questions, I believe, and there will not be a Q&A, but hopefully everybody attending, if you love the work of these filmmakers as we do, hopefully you'll stay in touch via Instagram or Facebook or reach out and propose a collab. Stay in touch with them. And but yeah, no, mainly thanks for joining us. Armor the Camera is a very special part of VC, and it's a special lineage. I guess it's sort of like the sisterhood of traveling pants, except there's not really a pair of pants. Anyhow, these films will be online through October, so if you missed them, please enjoy them on the Inventive Festival website.
Yes, you guys are amazing. Congrats on such an accomplishment, such great films. Thank you for sharing your personal stories with us. We're so blown away and inspired by all of your work. Yes, as Farouk said, if you enjoyed this conversation and want to see the festival lineup, please consider making a donation to Visual Communications. Your support will help sustain our year-round programs like Armed with a Camera. So go to vcmedia.org for more information.
Yeah, and we hope you'll continue to join for these VC conversations for the year 2020. And for the most recent updates on the festival, please visit festival.vcmedia.org or follow us on our social media accounts at VC Film Festival. And if you make any posts, please tag us at #LAAPFF 2020.
Congrats, everyone.
Congrats,
Thank
everybody.
you for joining us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations, everybody.
Congrats.
If anybody has any final words or shout outs, I think we can do a quick round, I believe.
Shout out to Nira. All right, and also shout out my mom. Okay.
Shout out to moms.
Hey, mom.
Just congratulations, everyone. It's so nice to be together in this ongoing pandemic. So It's just really great to see everyone's faces. Congratulations.
Retweet.
Yes, wonderful, thoughtful answers, and you guys are inspiring so many people. So keep going, and thank you so much for letting us see such personal, amazing work. I'm so inspired. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye,
Thanks, y'all.
everybody.